So you might be asking yourself, why is the engine bay completely empty if my goal is to get the car started? The thing is, a few things went wrong to get to this point, and that's what I'm going to be covering today. So the month is October. I've been on and off for about a year trying to get the car started, but I haven't put enough effort into getting it fully started, so that's why it wasn't running before, is what I thought. I finally decided it was time to set the focus on getting it started so I can make a video on it, hear the exhaust, and also I have just been teasing it a lot lately, and I'm sure people that do care about this car have wanted to see it running for a good while. And my idea for getting the car started was I was going to make a list of everything that I wanted to test, covering all 5 bases of getting an engine started, which is compression, timing, ignition, fuel, and spark. In my testing beforehand, I found that my FiTech system wasn't saving any of the data that I was putting into it, so I thought that that was the reason my car wouldn't start. So I did send it in after trying everything I could, because the data still wasn't saving no matter what I tried in the settings. And I got it sent back a bit later, and they said that it was fine. When I got it back, the settings were saving properly, so I don't know what I did wrong. They might just reset it or something. It's kind of stupid that it ended up that way, but I knew that it wasn't my FiTech system, because when I got it back, I stick my finger in the throttle body and my finger would be covered in gas. So it's definitely getting gas. The next step for me was to check for the ignition, because I know that I did put an electric ignition conversion kit in the car from Petronics. Wanted to make sure that everything was working out just fine and that I didn't set anything up wrong. I did some tests on it. It was working, and it was constantly working. The 2 things that you need to know to make sure that the ignition is running. So the next thing to check after that is timing. I set timing the old-fashioned way, where you stick your finger in the spark plug hole of the number 1 cylinder and you wait for the compression stroke, and when it comes to top dead center, you can stick your finger in there and feel it. That's where you set your base time. Now that I had the compression set, it was starting to want to start a little better. There's a few times where it actually fired off completely, but it was still completely random and it wouldn't start. So I had to figure out what else was wrong with this. I did have some problems with compression in the past, in the fact that I didn't set the valve lash properly, and the valve lash is how far you torque down the rockers on the heads. The problem I was having is I wasn't making enough compression before, because my rockers were tightened down too much to the point where the valves were just constantly open, so there's no way for it to make pressure. So what I did was I checked the compression on all the cylinders of the engine, and I found that 2 out of the 8 were making only 60 psi, whereas the other ones were making around 90. 90 is an okay pressure, but it should definitely be higher than that, and 60, you're not going to be able to get an engine to run on 60 psi. So that's where my problem was. I did mess with the valve lash a little further because I thought that was probably the problem, but I could not get it to go any higher than what it was at, 60 psi for those 2 cylinders. After a little bit of thinking, I realized that it was the piston rings that I put on. I just bought a set of piston rings that were set to go. I checked the gap on those piston rings. They were kind of big, but I decided, oh, it's okay, just throw them in. It's better than what I had before. And that was a bad mistake, because it's not able to make enough compression, especially in those 2 cylinders. Something bad went wrong to where I'm only making 60 psi, which is absolutely not enough to run the engine. So I decided that what I needed to do was get to work on pulling everything apart. I was going to do it inside the car. I pulled everything apart. I started pulling pistons, and I came to a bad thing where that one of the pistons on the skirts was cracked. Now this is probably obviously to a lot of people, but a cracked piston is never a good thing. That thing could shatter if you're driving down the road. It could just shatter, and that would require a new engine block, pretty much new everything, and that's not good. So it's a good thing that I caught it now instead of later. Me and my dad did some research together, and we found that The reason that the skirt was probably cracked was because of the cylinders not being exactly circular, and that they were a little bit oval due to wear on the engine over time. So now that I know that my engine block is not the best engine block I could have, that meant that I had to pull the engine block out of the car. So I put back together what I needed to be able to pull the engine out of the car, and I borrowed a cherry picker from a guy in my neighborhood, and I was able to disassemble everything, get it out of the car within 2 hours. It was super easy, but it sucks that I had to do it this way. On the crankshaft, I did notice that there was a bit of scratching. I'm going to try to get the crankshaft turned, get those scratches out, and I'll probably end up buying oversized bearings. Once I had the entire engine disassembled, I took it to a machine shop. I put it in the back of my Supra, and I took it to a machine shop after work that is pretty local to me. In order to rebuild this engine, I will have to buy some new parts. Those parts being new pistons, because I'm gonna have to get my block board, and my old pistons were cracked, so I'm gonna have to get slightly oversized pistons to fit the bore perfectly, along with some new rings, and also probably some new oversized bearings if I get the crank turned, or maybe even possibly new crank. I'll see what the machine guy says. Now, this does suck quite a bit that I have to do all this extra work on the engine and spend more money on it, but like Smacky's Garage says it best on one of my posts on YouTube, it's called a project for a reason. If you like this video, please comment, subscribe, like. Any form of engagement will help me grow the channel even more so I can make more videos like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Slipping slides down my throat, on a flight that I was next on. You don't smile